Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Tom McFarlin, and I am here with Carrie Dills on her very own podcast or web show, Office Hours FM. This episode is officially titled Turning Tables because she's not hosting. I am, or we are. And the idea behind this show is that Carrie's done an amazing job over the past however many years, which we'll talk about in a minute, of hosting over 100 episodes of Office Hours FM. So we wanted to take this opportunity to turn the tables, flip the show around a little bit, have fun, talk to Carrie and ask her questions when she's normally asking us questions. So if you're going to ask questions via Twitter, please use the hashtag OfficeFM. You can use the questions feature in the broadcast, or you can I have questions collated via email, so that should be taken care of. With that said, before we get started, I want to say that this particular episode is brought to you, or brought to us, by the Office Hours community and the awesome people who are involved and who help continue to make this particular podcast and the actual membership site and the membership community a success. So with that said, let's get started. Carrie, how wonderful are you doing today?
I'm good. It's kind of weird to be on this side of the table, even though I'm technically on the same side of the table as I always am.
Sure. You're just on
in front of my monitor, but
yeah. And you're on the same side of the microphone, but you are going to be asking no questions as far as I am aware.
All right. I'm not zipping my lips. I'm refraining from asking questions.
Okay. So the only question that you're allowed to ask is, can you clarify that? And the answer I will give is probably no, because I don't always know what I'm talking about or that other people are talking about. But I'm kidding. Anyway, so while we're waiting for some questions to trickle in via Twitter, and I do have some via email that I'll get to in a minute, I'm going to start with something that's actually only tangentially related to business.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, you are a runner.
And off and on. Sometimes I fall off the bandwagon. Right. But
I mean,
yes.
Depending on the year, but I'm sure maybe it's depending on seasons or whatever. I know that I'm similar. But you've done what? You do half marathons or you do marathons?
Halves. I've never done a full marathon. And currently I could not go run a half. I'm not trained.
Well,
present.
My question wrapped around all of that, because I also enjoy fitness as a hobby. I'm not a gym junkie. I'm not here to coach you on how to get fit, Dills. But what I'm curious about is, do you find there to be any relationship between when you exercise and how you feel during the workday? Because read any fitness blog, they'll say, oh, you feel great. You release endorphins and you are you're priming your body and you're getting healthy and things like that. But at the same time, you can read some other people who say, oh, I started working out and now I feel tired and I had a slump and I don't know this, that, or the other. What is your personal experience in terms of your exercise and how it impacts you specifically in terms of just your day-to-day work?
I'm going to definitely go with the energizing category. I tend to listen to business books when I'm working out. And so the wheels are turning and being away from my desk. I found that's it just always gets me thinking and gets me excited about trying out something new when I get back to my desk. That said, so usually energizing. The exception to the rule is if you're training for a super duper long race and you go out like on a long run, then no, it's nap time afterward.
Yeah. Or eat a entire pizza afterwards.
I usually dominate a plate of nachos afterward.
Okay. I mean, that works. Because I know how that goes. So that's cool. Yeah. I ask because I'm always interested in the way that different people who are running their own business or they're freelancers or just who they've kind of got to juggle, hey, keeping up my development skill, keeping up my business skill, et cetera, and then finding time to work out. How does it impact their just day-to-day work? So cool. Okay, first answer. I want to ask is from Twitter. This is from Jackie D. Elia. If I've mispronounced the name, I apologize. She asks, what inspired you to turn the tables for this episode?
Oh, am I answering that?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I'm not answering questions. I'm asking them.
But
the
you were
tables were
actually
turned.
the inspiration for this episode. Yeah, so Tom emailed me, excuse me, thought it would be a neat idea. And I was like, okay, cool. And actually, Jackie had commented to me in the past that she enjoys the different guests I have on, but sometimes she has questions for me. And this is the opportunity to answer all of those burning questions that you have.
Yes, the ones that keep them awake at night. They have an office hours moleskin notebook, and they just write questions, and they're under a carry category. And this is the opportunity to go down that list.
I pray that no one is laying awake at night restless because they're thinking about questions for this podcast.
I am pretty sure Matt Medeiros says that.
Well, I mean, Matt's the exception to every rule, right?
Yeah. And I know that he's not sleeping a lot right now because he has a newborn. So he's just sitting there holding his child while thinking about questions. But that's getting off topic. That's for after office hours FM. Anyway, so Paul Euler says, this is fun because everyone loves a teacher's pet. Who is your favorite member of the Office FM community?
Okay, well, that's not really a fair question, Paul. Let me answer this way. My favorite members of the community are really those of you who are engaging regularly, either via Twitter during the live show or respond to the newsletters that I send out. That, like, I know I can see from stats that people listen to this show, but it's completely anonymous. So when people actually interact or I can see their faces or see their little avatars, I love that because that's a connection to me that doesn't exist with the folks who listen to the show, but which is fine. I feel like I just dissed everyone who doesn't watch live, which that was not the intent of that answer. But you asked me to pick a favorite, so that's my favorite, Paul.
There you go. I think it's a good answer. One question I have, and this is specifically for people that have not necessarily been following you for a few years or or maybe they're new to office hours, but it's a two-parter. One, what motivated you to start a show like this? Because it is a lot of work. And in starting a podcast, there's money and time involved between buying your hardware, any software that you might use, planning the show, things like that. There's a lot of overhead in the sense of some hardware and then a lot of preparation. And then secondly, has the show changed formats as you've gotten further into it?
Yes and yes. I'm going to answer both of the questions together because they kind of flow into each other. So the way the show started, it was called Genesis Office Hours. And if you listen to episode 100, I talk a little bit more about this. But originally created the show as a way to alleviate inbox traffic. So I'd had a lot of people coming through my contact form, ask me questions, technical questions about using the Genesis framework. And that was a lot of me taking time to respond in what was just a one-on-one thing. Like that, once I spent that time and gave that information, that was, that's time gone and one person helped. But I thought with the podcast, office hours, meaning I would open up the doors of my office. You could come in and ask me technical questions about Genesis. I started redirecting all those questions in my inbox to, hey, just go listen to the podcast. I'll answer any questions that you want during that hour. And it turned out, so the first episode I did solo, and it was so awkward. Not just because it was my first podcast and I'd never done that before, but just because it was me by myself. And I don't know, I found that really very awkward. And so I started having guests on. And as soon as I started having guests on, the show started taking on a different flavor because people wanted to ask questions of my guests. So that was sort of evolution number one, kind of becoming the interview show. The second evolution was around the episode maybe 60, 50, somewhere in there. And that was when I dropped the name Genesis Office Hours and just called it Office Hours, because a lot of what was discussed on the show was not necessarily specific to Genesis. And I felt like that I was limiting people who might be interested in the show and benefit from the content of the podcast just because it sounded like it was all about Genesis. So switched over to the name officehours.fm. And since then have continued on with the interview format. But as of 2016, I rebooted specifically to be more focused on the business aspects of those who run their businesses with WordPress or use WordPress to make money versus a more technical podcast. So that brings us where we are today.
That's cool. I like that idea that I like the idea that it's gone from Genesis development to business, because me personally, I think that for those who are like really deep in development or design, there are shows and podcasts that get really, really heavy in that kind of stuff. And I think that depending on the audience to which you're trying to appeal, that can be kind of a turnoff. And so, but when you are able to talk more about business, designers and developers and implementers and bloggers, like business transcends each of those specific industries. So you're able to cover a variety of different things that a much wider audience can learn from. So that's cool. I mean, I'm a fan of the format, obviously. This is like the third or fourth time on the show. Now I'm hosting it. Next year, I will be the only one on the show. So anyway,
I'm like putting all duties over on you.
We'll do like the Jay Leno Conan thing where you'll duck out and I'll be there for 2 episodes and you'll come back and I'll hop over to a completely different channel. So anyway, so this is a good question. This might actually result in a discussion, but Tate Barber on Twitter asks, why should bloggers use WordPress in favor of something like Medium? And should those blogger onlys just use WordPress.com?
The blogger only crowd, and this is an answer that could turn into a conversation. Everybody is different and it depends on your needs. Of course, I'm a WordPress evangelist. Small, large, whatever you need, WordPress, you can do it, especially now with REST API coming in. But as I was sitting down with a buddy and he was showing me, I'd been trying to talk him into letting me rebuild a site on WordPress because I thought his site sucked. I didn't say it in those words, but he had a site built on Wix. And so he sat down and he showed me how he was editing his site. And it's a site that it's a brewery actually. So they update their menu daily. It's kind of constant information going on. And I saw how easy it was for him to accomplish what he needed to do. And this isn't the blogger question, but still somebody whose needs were met just fine by Wix. Now, philosophically, I'm not a fan of Wix because you can't take your data with you when you leave. And somebody can tell me if I've just misquoted that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So from a standpoint of ownership, owning your data, having the flexibility to do with it what you want, I think WordPress is absolutely the right answer. But sometimes you don't need to buy a house when a tent will do. So based on the needs, there may certainly be situations where some of those Wix, Weebly kind of stuff are good options for people.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to using, let's say that you're a blogger only, or you're someone who blogs more frequently or as a hobby, why choose WordPress over Medium? Or should you?
But I mean, there's really no reason you can't do both.
Mm-hmm.
Publish your content on WordPress and then republish it on Medium, and you're twice the merrier in terms of where your content is being published and seen. So
Yeah.
I am not familiar enough with Medium as I guess is using that as a single tool for web publishing to comment on why you would choose WordPress over Medium. But I would say, like you said, go both.
Yeah. So I've looked at Medium, and it's been a couple of years now. I was writing on Medium. I decided, okay, given this type of post, it doesn't really fit on my blog. I'll try out a few posts on Medium. Now, the user experience of Medium is really polished, and I think they are doing some really interesting things with Medium. I don't really have a strong dislike for the service. Data ownership is very important to me. And I know that people will say, well, you can export your data from Medium, and that's true. The thing is that with WordPress, and people will say, hey, you own your data with WordPress. Well, that's true as well. However, you're also paying a hosting provider to host your site. So your data is there. So you still need to set up a system in a way that you're able to pull your data out systematically at certain intervals.
Not if you're using .com.
That's true. And now I was going to come to .com, but with self-hosted versus Medium, the one thing about if you're just a I don't want to say just a blogger, but if you're a bloggers only, to quote this tweet, I think that Medium, it offers some things in terms of like what you see is what you get, in terms of everyone's site's going to look the same. Everyone's articles are going to look the same. It's going to function the same. You don't have to worry about any of how do I navigate this site, etc. With WordPress, you, on the other hand, have the ability. There are Medium inspired themes. At the same time, you can build more of a site rather than just blogs. And what I have seen more people doing now than, say, last year is posting on their WordPress site and then posting the same article on Medium. I see some people that have fully moved to Medium. And I read an article last week that was pretty opinionated on why you should just, no major company should be using a service such as Medium, Facebook, or any of the other ones like that to purely base the publishing of their business on. Now, this wasn't a pro WordPress article. WordPress didn't even come up in the article, but it was talking about if these services ever, to use a phrase from the Valley, should they ever pivot, then what's going to happen to your data and what will the service become? So those are some good questions to ask. And I think it's safe to say that WordPress is pretty much in the business of allowing you to publish, where publishing is blogging, publishing is maintaining content, and publishing can be anything, basically taking a piece of data or a set of data from one source and then being able to publish it on the web via WordPress, dress it up however you want, and also even transfer it however you want. You know, if you're going to use some type of REST API based editor, things like that. And the last thing to mention for this question is, should blogger onlys just use WordPress.com? To me, that's actually a question of experience, because I know some people who they're really good writers and they're pretty tech savvy in that I could say, hey, go here, you can set up your domain, you can begin blogging. It's all in one. Go for it. But I can't imagine telling someone who they're not far enough in to say, okay, you want to buy a domain here. Then you need to update your name servers to point to your host, which you've purchased here. And then you need to create your database. And once the database is created, you need to then download a copy of WordPress, upload it via FTP, and then configure it. Or even if you have a one-click install, you've still got to navigate whatever control panel, cPanel, Plesk, whatever, set it up. So it gets very complicated very fast when you go self-hosted. For those of us who are used to it, it's almost rote. I mean, people have done scripts to almost automate the whole thing. And I think WCLI makes it, super simple.
Yep.
So I can't say that Blogger Only should just use WordPress.com or should just use WordPress self-hosting. I use their tech savviness to determine what's their motivation for blogging, what's their budget, how experienced are they, and then maybe use that as a funnel or a decision tree on where they should go. So, okay, this is a good one. Dan Beal has asked, Carrie, what meta field manager do you typically use and why when developing?
That's an easy question, Dan. I use the term meta plugin, and I use it because you told me to 6 months ago.
What is this? Is like subversive self-promotion. What is this? I'm banning Dan from asking any more questions.
He said he was going to troll. That wasn't really technically the troll question, but yeah,
that's self-promotion. But that's good. I mean, now people know that this plugin is out there, and I will say that, man, the introducing term metadata from a development standpoint, just having that table alone and that API, or having those tables alone and the API available is awesome. So any plugin that enhances that, go for it. Some are going to be better than others because that's the nature of it. But yeah, I mean, good answer and good form of self-promotion. I feel like it's one of those. I feel like Dan's one of those dudes who would walk on to Shark Tank if you've ever watched it, and he throws out a valuation for what he's done, and all he wants to do is get his name out in front of the audience, and he walks away with no deal. So
I would still cast a vote for him any day.
On Shark Tank?
For Dan.
Oh,
Whenever
okay.
Dan appeared, if he was on some sort of a show or reality TV, get voted off the island thing, I would keep Dan around for a good long while until it just became me or him. And then, of course, I would just steamroll him, crush him, and call it a victory.
When it comes to reality shows, I've got so many things that I could derail this. That was fun. Good question, Dan. So Jackie asks another question. This is good. Are there any common threads you see in freelancers that have created a sustainable business model?
Any common that have created a sustainable business model? I would say of the people that I look to and admire in the WordPress space specifically that have businesses that have quote unquote stood the test of time and whatnot. They're people who take care of themselves and physically and seem to make that some sort of a priority in their day. And then the other thing I've noticed that has just been, and of course I'm speaking to the men folk in this one, but so many young men who love their families and who are family people. And that is, I've been blown away by the number, like it's a disproportionate what I've seen in the WordPress community versus what I see in the rest of just life in terms of, young guys in their 20s and 30s who are, building these businesses and make their families an absolute priority. I love it. So those would be a couple of common threads. There are folks who take care of themselves, folks who, and not just, that doesn't just apply to guys who are loving on their families. This certainly applies to the rest of us too that have, that are committed to relationships outside of work.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that bringing up just specifically, guys who are doing it, I don't think that's excluding anyone else. Speaking from experience, once, so I started my business before we had kids. Now that we do, I have a hard stop each day, and I generally let all my clients know this is when I stop. And it's never been met with any pushback. So, yeah. And I do agree with you that there is just from what I've observed, there's a disproportionate amount of people in WordPress who will, they've got their priorities where it's, families above work, and That's not to say there aren't some times where you end up at your computer late finishing something up. But and this is from personal experience, this is from some friends that I know, various peers, man, when you're in the development field or the design field, or maybe just the technology field in general, there's a strong tension between whatever work is demanding of you and juggling or trying to balance the demands of work and the responsibility of family. And I don't like using the phrase demands of family, because your family shouldn't be demanding anything of you. You know, it's a really serious thing for me, because I think that this is something that when you get into a relationship and you opt to have kids, or if you have kids, then you've got that responsibility. And man, speaking personally, just having kids, it's been fantastic. I absolutely love it. And I got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. I'm only 4 years in. So I know that everyone always has their advice and wait till the teenage years and all of that, but whatever. My wife and I are happy. I love my girls. So sometimes you just have to kind of you put work down at a fixed time, and you'll resume the next day. So let's see, a couple of other questions. This one's good from a business perspective. This is from Adam Thompson. Do you do your own taxes, use software, or use an accountant? This is a first-time viewer live from New Zealand.
Holla! Hey,
yeah.
Adam. Glad to have you live.
New Zealand, man, where they filmed Lord of the Rings. I plan to go there. That's on my bucket list.
All right, so, Adam, do you have a couch available on? Yeah, y'all can connect later on travel planning. So I use QuickBooks Online just for daily bookkeeping sort of stuff, and I do all my own bookkeeping. When it comes to tax time, I hand all of that over to a CPA, mostly because I think that the CPA just kind of is a layer of protection that someone else is looking at things besides me and my husband, and then is also to make sure that I'm taking advantage of whatever benefits I can take advantage of as a small business owner in terms of deductions and whatnot. I had, what episode was it? It's in the 100s. So go back to Office Hours.
11 episodes.
Yeah, I do. Go back to officehours.fm and look, but I recently had a CPA, a certified public accountant on, and she gave out some fantastic information and could go into a lot more detail on that stuff.
I echo pretty much the same thing. I was using some software to help keep my books. And then when it came time for taxes, and I was doing this for years, when it came time for taxes, I would then hand my books over to my CPA. Now, just in the last 2 years, in January of 2016, it was this year, I handed everything over to my CPA. And I said, no, I still keep my books because I'm anal about that stuff, but they do as well. So, and then I do quarterly taxes. And the idea behind it all is just, I've got someone who's an expert. I can hand it off to them. And this is largely contingent on whatever rate you're quoted. But if the amount of time, the decision for me was simple. If the amount of time I would save in paying them to do it would result in me being able to do more work that I'm trying to do, then I'll do it. And so far, it's probably been the best decision that I've made for my business. And it's the one decision that I've probably made, I should have made earlier, I guess I would say. But a lot of that, as Carrie alluded to, with exemptions and deductions and things like that, it changes, at least in the United States, it changes a bit. It changes when you have kids, changes on your tax bracket. It changes. It depends on how many miles you've driven for work, how much money you spend on gasoline. I mean, it can get complicated really fast, and it sounds really daunting at first. Like when I first got into it, I was overwhelmed, and then you learn, and then you do it yourself, and then you get frustrated. And then either you do what Carrie does because she's smart enough to do it herself, and you do what I do, and I think, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I hand it off to a CPA. So,
and we just got confirmation. Thanks, Patty, for tweeting. It was episode 108 that has that bookkeeping and
nice.
taxes for freelancers.
Awesome. So episode 108. Check it out, Adam. Certified CPA answering this kind of stuff. Although I have no clue about anything regarding taxes in New Zealand. So hopefully it's not any more complicated. Hopefully it's easier. Tara Clays, I may have mispronounced that last name, so I apologize. She asks, has your podcast been the biggest contributor to your quote unquote fan base compared to your blog and compared to lynda.com?
Oh, why did you put my fan base in air quotes?
I didn't.
Tara, why did you put my fan base in air quotes? I'm just kidding. First of all, fan base is really weird sounding to me. In terms of circle of exposure and people that I've gotten to know, Lynda, I have no clue. I have zero metric for knowing that, unless somebody comes to me and was like, "Hey, I found you on Lynda," which that's not really what their voices sound like. That was just and the podcast, even though it's been going strong for several years now, or 2.5 years or so, it remains a relatively small fan base, if you will. I would love to see the show get into the earbuds of more listeners, and not because of me, but because I really think I do have some great guests on that provide great information to that freelancer small business community that's WordPress centric. So probably, I guess I would have to say then my blog. That's been the longest running place where I've published content and probably been introduced to people.
That's a good answer. Obviously, I'm a big fan of blogs. Real quick, before we go to the next set of questions, it's a reminder that this episode is brought to all of you amazing people, including Matt Medeiros and Dan Beal, by the Office Hours community. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you for tuning in, asking questions. Please continue to do so via Twitter, via the question feed here in the broadcast, or via email. With that said, we'll keep going. So I have a question for you.
Bring it.
You have a pinned tweet. Quote, I have a personal policy to avoid any event where an adult diaper would net me a competitive advantage.
Do you want to know where that tweet came from?
I don't want to find myself in this situation. Please enlighten me on how I should be on the lookout for any events that may require an adult diaper.
Well, since we've already mentioned Lord of the Rings, that's a lot of hours of footage there and reels to go through. So imagine that you're in a competition to drink as many Cokes as you can while simultaneously watching a Lord of the Rings marathon. An adult diaper could net you a competitive advantage.
Okay.
Right?
That is very difficult logic to argue with.
And actually where that tweet came from, though, it was there was some astronaut that went off her rocker and put on an adult diaper and drove across the country, which, she'd have to stop for gas. So I don't understand why she couldn't pee while she stopped for gas, but it was a time saver. The diaper was a time saver. I think she was arrested and possibly needed mental help. But that was the origin of the tweet.
And you said this was an astronaut?
I'm pretty sure. So I'm pretty sure. Somebody Google this right now, because astronaut adult diaper. We'll see if that returns any Google results. Oh no, they're space diapers. Oh yeah, diaper-wearing astronaut jailed in love triangle plot. That was February 5th, 2007. A NASA astronaut who was arrested after driving hundreds of miles to Orlando wearing adult diapers used in space.
I feel like I need to give some type of shout out to Florida and Norcross for that, because that's a story that he would say, where Andrew Norcross, who he is at the top of Reactive Studios. If you guys aren't familiar with him, they're worth a follow as well.
Absolutely.
He is someone who would say, in what other state would this happen?
You know what? All the weird things do happen in Florida, except for Mike Hale tweeted the other day about something really bizarre, and it was not in Florida. It was the kind of thing. It was somebody. A guy was arrested, and he had been using a head, like a deceased person's head, to get high. Like apparently, I had to Google this too, but apparently the embalming fluids can enhance the effects of marijuana. And so this guy had a head stuffed under his front porch, and he and his buddies would use it to get high. And I can't believe we're even talking about this on the podcast, but it didn't. The fact is, it didn't happen in Florida, which proves that there are weirdos everywhere, not just in Florida, even though there's maybe a greater concentration there. Interesting.
Sounds like something that my friend up in Boston, Massachusetts, who runs Slocum Studios, might have done, but I digress. Devinder Singh asks, what were some cool and not so cool things of working at Crowd Favorite?
Cool and not so cool. The cools were a large part of why I accepted the job in the first place. And that was the opportunity to work with a team. Because when you're, I love freelancing. I'm back freelancing now. So obviously I'm a big fan, but it's also very isolating. You also kind of get stuck in a rut in terms of the tools that you're using or the way that you do things. And so I loved being able to work in a team, see how they approached problem solving with code, and it challenged and grew me. Let's see, what else did I love? I loved working for Chris Lemma. I loved a paycheck every other week auto deposited into my bank account. What I did not love filling out a timesheet and accounting for my time in 15-minute increments. Even though you really should do that anyways, I did not love that. I did not love meetings. There's always a lot of meetings. People are posting pictures of that astronaut now on Twitter, and it's making me laugh. But and ultimately, I did not love not having the energy at the end of the day to continue to pursue my own pet projects, which is why I decided to leave, and that was back in March.
So you mentioned something that I'm interested in asking you about. You said that you should be keeping account of your time, maybe in 15-minute increments, maybe not. As now back to being self-employed, do you do that?
That is an excellent question, and no. I have learned all these good habits that I should have and promptly disregarded all of them. All of them. One thing I will say, I have not done, other than a couple of really small, 1 or 2 hours or less maintenance projects for existing clients. I have not done any new client work. Mm-hmm. So to some degree, I would say I haven't tested it out in my own personal scenario. But in terms of when I'm spending time on my personal projects, am I running a clock? I'm not keeping tabs.
Yeah. I have found that early on, I would keep account of my time. And then I moved to a phase where with some clients, I just would ask, do they want an account of my time, or are they acceptable with the estimate that I've provided? And now I pretty much give the estimate. This is what it will be. And then if they ask for the breakdown, I will give it. But I think over time, when you're doing it. Now it's different from working for a business, but if that's how they handle remote workers, that's how they do it. So it is what it is. But I think the more experienced you get, and the more of a streamlined workflow you get, and the more you're familiar with your skills or your skill set, you get a pretty good intuitive sense of how long a given project will take. Even if there's a learning curve, I think that you can kind of generally guesstimate, hey, this is how long it will likely take to learn this. At least that's my experience. So yeah, I don't keep timesheets anymore, unless asked. So let's answer that. Now I have one question here in email from John Rittman, who says, do you use OBS for podcasts or another program? And what do you use for video clip merging software?
No, I don't use OBS. I'm actually not familiar with it. And I don't use, so here's the beauty of doing a live podcast. It's actually a little bit lazy of me. Some people are like, oh, live would scare me, but no, live is excellent. And let me tell you why. No one expects editing on a live broadcast. So once these are done, I actually posted a blog post about my process showing how to do this the other day, but which I can throw into the show notes. But I take the video that automatically gets posted on YouTube, since it's a Google Hangout. I download the MP4. I then bring that MP4 into Audacity, which is a free software for Mac for audio editing. And from there, I go through and just do a little bit of noise removal and compression. And if, say my internet went out during that episode and there was like a 10-second block of silence, I'll remove some of that. And then I'll export that as the MP3, and then that's what ends up on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever else my feed is getting picked up. But the video I leave as is in all of its unrefined glory.
That's great for those of us who, if you're just listening to this podcast, you're really missing out, because someone on this podcast is wearing or may not be wearing something.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to step away for just a second. Let the record reflect that I am wearing pants.
Yes. Well, actually, technically speaking, I thought that was a dress or a skirt.
It's a skirt, but it's,
okay.
I mean, I am clothed.
Okay.
I am clothed.
I'm clothed as well, mostly.
Excellent.
Maybe.
Well, we don't know. Don't stand up. Don't stand up.
I won't. Don't worry. Gotta keep you guessing. So Jackie asks, how has value-based pricing changed how you approach projects? That's a good question.
Yeah, Jackie always has good questions. So I've never converted fully to a value-based pricing model, but I think what that taught me is that you don't price based on hours. You price based on the total effort and what you think what it's worth to you to do that work. So not quite a value-based pricing approach, but it's definitely pulled me out of a mindset of quoting hours. Now, I mean, sometimes you have to quote hours if it's, hey, how long will it take you to do this or that, like for an existing client? And then it's just going to charge hourly. But for entire projects, no. Gone to a, now when I'm estimating, I'll estimate my effort in terms of hours, but the client does not see that.
That's a good point. That is how I put together my estimates too. Like, I'll just take notes. I'll say, okay, given, however many 1 to n tasks, estimate an hour per task. And then, well, this could really get more complicated, because then I start breaking things into milestones into sprints, or a week or half a week or a week and a half, whatever. And then I say, okay, here's how much it'll cost for that particular. And then I sum it up. I do addition like I did in first grade, and then send it over to them. Addition. It's the only math I still use. I don't know why I said that. So Tate, okay, this is cool. He says, Which projects get you fired / pumped up? And then he flexes 3 times. And he says, which don't? And are there any tips for when you're just not feeling it?
Oh man, that's a 3-parter.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you what does not get me fired up, and that would be brochure sites. I've done, I couldn't even tell you how many of those are in the archives now. And it's not challenging, which leads me to the point of what does pump me up are projects where I'm, say, maybe 70% like, oh yeah, I got this. I've done it before, or at least I've read about how to do it. And the other 30% is a stretch, where I know that I'll have to dig in and learn something new. So yeah, those are the projects that kind of gear me up. Like, for example, I'm just got finished teaching a course out at Linda. And this is one of the things that I love about teaching at Linda. And it was on CSS grids and frameworks. Well, let me tell you that I don't personally use any CSS framework other than, like, I like Bourbon. I use Bourbon in my projects. But this was the course I was asked to teach. So what do I do but go out and learn and research and study various CSS frameworks and grids. So it's, it's something that challenged me to go learn something new. So yeah, those are the kinds of projects that would be most up my alley.
I think that's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go for it.
I was going to add that I think it's interesting that there's that was you going out and having to learn a handful of these frameworks, because man, there was a boom of them about, I feel like 3 or 4 years ago. And then the ones that are really top notch are the ones that are still around. There's other ones that you can look them up online, but they've kind of languished and you can tell. But most of them are open source. Why wouldn't they be? It's CSS and JavaScript. So, you can't, whatever. So, you can see just how updated they are by looking at the repositories or things like that. And really, I think, and I could be wrong, you're the one that's done all the research, but there's only about 4 or 5 that are really top notch.
If you're looking for a full out comprehensive framework, you're either picking Bootstrap or Foundation. Those are the leaders of the pack. Now, if you're looking for something more minimal or just a grid, like Bourbon or Suzy are great if you just need to incorporate a grid in a project. So there are some of the lightweight ones that there's probably more of a smattering of them that are still active development, but those larger ones, the field narrowed, and boy, I'm glad it did. Otherwise, I might not have wanted to teach that course.
There's one that I found years ago that was called Semantic UI, and it looked really good, but I haven't followed development on. I don't know if it's still, like, I agree with you completely. Bootstrap and Foundation are at the top. And, but yeah, Semantic looked really good, although I don't know how much it stagnated or not. So I don't know, just throwing that out there. And the last part of Tate's question, which I think I interrupted you from answering, which is, are there any tips for when you're not feeling it?
For when you're not feeling it, step away from the computer. That's when, for me, it's going and getting outside for a while and doing something that's completely unrelated to whatever the task at hand was, just to sort of do a little mental reset. And then that can help you. And so that helps a lot. Sometimes there's just tasks that you flat out do not want to do, and resistance is strong because you just don't want to do them. And those, buck up, like set a clock, set a 30-minute timer or something, and just get down to it and knock it off so you can go on to more fun things.
Agreed. And sometimes you just have to plow through it. Just get it done. Yeah. So Devinder Singh has also asked, with your courses at Linda, are you tempted to start full courses on your personal website?
Yes. And I don't know if that would fall under the brand of my website or not, because I don't have anything in the works in that category. But I love teaching. I have found that that's sort of my sweet spot. I enjoy it. It's a nice reprieve from client work. And it's frankly it's rewarding when it's feel like you're helping other people go forth and be better at what they do, which is a really cool feeling. Obviously, I have contractual agreements with Linda to not do stuff that would cannibalize my material there. So I would give them first right of refusal if I had some wonderful course idea. But yes, I would definitely say in the next year, look out for additional educational materials coming out.
So following up with the CSS framework conversation, before I ask the question, what is the elevator pitch to the Utility Pro theme that you have for those of you who aren't familiar with it, because they need some context for this question?
Sure. So the Utility Pro theme is a child theme built on the Genesis framework, and the sales pitch that I'll give here, because I know I have a lot of developers in the audience, is it is meant to be a framework for starting your projects. So it's completely SaaS based and Grunt. So if you're a Gulp fan, sorry, even though I think Tanya Mork over at Know the Code has done some examples of taking that theme and using Gulp instead. But anyways, what it's meant to be is a starting point for projects that you can strip out what you don't need, add in what you do. The box, it meets WCAG 2.0 accessibility guidelines. It's perfect for LTR, left to right, or RTL languages that read right to left. So the layouts flip depending on what language your WordPress install is in. And it comes with, I think I've got 10 language translations now. Actually, a guy just finished a Chinese translation for me. So it's meant to be a developer's playground. But if you don't need all of those things and you just need a theme that works, it's got a really solid code base, that would be the one.
So the question then is, after your CSS grid / framework research, do you feel you'll incorporate any of them into the next version of Utility Pro?
That's a great question, and no, I really am happy with Bourbon. If I was to diverge and use something else, Suzy would probably be the grid I chose. So if I did another theme, maybe I would switch to Suzy just to try out something different. But since Utility Pro already incorporates Bourbon Neat is the grid, not Bourbon. Since it already encompasses those, I would just keep it.
All right, we're almost done. Got just a couple more minutes, so I'll fit in one more question, and if there's time, I'll do a rapid fire.
I'll answer fast.
So, all right, so here's the question. How did you get started with lynda.com?
This is a fun story, but I'm going to try to tell it really fast. So I was a fan of Linda from way back in the day, long before she had the video tutorials. She published
So for those of you who are still watching and still tuned in, we are having some slight technical difficulties. We're going to get back on track here in just a minute. So please stand by. I have no cheesy music to play for you. So please just set up your iTunes or your Spotify and tune into whatever music you like to listen to. And it looks like Carrie is back.
For the record, I am actually hardwired into my router right now. That was just complete router failure. I'm now...
Somebody's hacking you.
Probably. I don't know where I cut out.
Well, I don't know what other people heard. I heard you say, as far as Linda was concerned, you had been following her for a long time. That was the end.
Boom. Okay, so then to pick up the storyline, then when I wanted to learn WordPress, I went to lynda.com and took their WordPress courses, which are taught by Morten Rand Hendrickson. And I got the opportunity to meet Morten in person at WordCamp San Francisco. This is why you should go to WordCamps, people.
Agreed.
Truth. And Morten ended up introducing me to the folks at Lynda. So I love to tell the story that you can be someone who learns from Lynda and then actually turns around and gets to teach for them. So you too could be a Lynda instructor.
Nice. Recruiting.
That's right.
All right. So with that, we are a little bit over, but given the fact that we had a slight blip, I think we should go on just a little bit longer. So if you had to... So try to answer these as fast as you can.
Okay.
If you had to name your own CSS framework, what name would you give it?
Major.
Okay.
It's the name of my dog.
Nice. If someone came to you saying that Utility Pro was copyright infringement, you had to rename the theme immediately, what would you rename it to?
Utilization Pro? I don't know.
Okay, that'll work. What is your favorite type of music to listen to whenever you are heads down working on a development project?
I actually like quiet.
Okay. Do you listen to music at all?
I do. I listen to lots of music.
What's your favorite kind?
Classic rock, probably.
I like that answer. What, in terms of the show, do you break the show into seasons?
I do. This is season 2, since I started doing seasons at the beginning of 2016. And that was in large part thanks to some advice from Matt Medeiros.
Oh, nice. That guy again.
I know, he keeps coming up.
What's the short answer as to why you do seasons?
The short answer is to have there be an end of the line or something, an achievable point at the end of the horizon versus just something that goes on indefinitely. It's nice to have a stop point, even if I know I'm going to start it right back up again.
Nice. That's a good answer. So Tate Barber says, quick, Team Valor, Instinct, or Mystic?
Mystic, baby.
And let's say, okay, have you watched, do you watch any TV?
I do.
Do you like Mr. Robot?
I've never watched it. I've never even heard of it.
Okay. Anyone watching this show or anyone that's technically tech savvy, watch Mr. Robot. Start with season 1. Binge it now. Then get into season 2. It's 4 episodes in. You need to be watching it.
I'm on it.
I watched season 1 in about 2 days. I would have watched it in 1 day, but parental responsibilities. And then I went and watched the first season again. Immediately it became one of my top 5 favorite TV shows. So
I'm on it. That's my duty. Like, I'm writing it in Todoist right now.
Yes. Good. Nice. This episode is brought to you by Mr. Robot USA Networks. And lastly, if you had one piece of advice to give someone who is going to, or who is making the transition or thinking about making the transition into going into freelancing or starting your own business, that would be...
Oh gosh, I'm going to say it was some excellent advice given to me many years ago, and that is find whatever it is you love to do and find some client that will pay you to do that.
It's good advice. I know that there are people out there who say that, because it's one of those things that people, so some people say, hey, you should follow your passion, and some people say, no, you shouldn't do that. That's bad advice. You could insert that. I feel like, at least in our culture, that is the American culture, you can insert that with anything. Oh, you should do X. No, you should not. You should do not X. You're always going to hear that.
You should follow your passions as long as you can find someone to pay you to do them.
Yeah.
If you can't find someone to pay you, then keep it a hobby.
Or reevaluate your passions. Reevaluate your passions. So and then keep doing it. I'm just kind of rambling at that point, but yeah, I agree. Like I went after what it was I was most passionate about, and it has been working. So plan to do that for as long as I possibly can. But anyway, let me see. Is there any? Oh, Tate says you gave the wrong answer.
I'm taking it he is not Team Mystic.
Apparently not. So for those who are not familiar, what is this from?
This is a Pokemon Go thing, which is a new recent obsession. Such an obsession that I thought I could capitalize on the gross popularity of the game. I created a t-shirt shop and launched that on Monday at Pokemon-swag.com. And it only took 72 hours for me to get shut down by my print fulfillment center for potential unacceptable content. So yeah, sometimes you try, sometimes you fail. Yep. You try something different.
And if you're going to fail hard with potential copyright infringement.
Fail hard with the potential to be sued by Nintendo.
Ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Exactly.
So I think that will wrap up this episode. This has been a lot of fun. I hope everyone who's watching or everyone who is listening right now enjoyed it. If you did, please let Carrie know through Twitter or email or snail mail, though that might be weird if you know her address. But if it's good, maybe we'll do this on episode 211. And in the meantime, please remember that this episode was brought to you by the Office Hours FM community. If you haven't checked it out, head over to officehours.fm. It will give you all the information that you need to know on how to join, what all it entails. And then for those of you who are not a member of the community, this podcast is hosted every week. Is that correct?
Yep. Every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern.
And so it's worth tuning in live so you can have some fun, or listening to it a little bit later where it's just as fun, but you're not actually part of the fun. So make your decision and please pursue that. With that said, thank you, Carrie, for being a guest on your own show, as we have all hijacked it.
Thank you, Tom, for being a wonderful host, and thanks to everybody for the great questions.
Thank you for putting wonderful in air quotes. That makes me feel good. And with that said, I will let Carrie go ahead and end this episode. Thank you all for also tuning in. This has been a lot of fun. I love this show. I think Carrie's awesome. I think those of you who tune in regularly and ask awesome questions. With that said, Carrie, you do the outro.
You wrapped it up beautifully. I'm just going to say that I will see you back here, same bat time, same bat day, next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And hold on one sec. Since you are tuning in and listening to the end of the podcast, I'm going to give you a little secret bonus, which means that my guest next week is going to be Lee Jackson, another fellow podcaster. So there you go. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.